Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on repelling, excluding, and deterring rodents. My name is Carolyn Tricino, and I'm the Director of Poison-Free Agoura. I'm excited to do this presentation with Kathy Schoonmaker of the National Park Service. And Kathy has some great information for you to get started with, so we're going to have Kathy take it away right now.
I work with the National Park Service, as Carolyn said, and we've been studying carnivores in the Santa Monica Mountains and other wildlife for many years. So I wanted to talk a little bit today about why rodent poisons are important to us and how they are impacting the wildlife in the Santa Monica Mountains. So as I mentioned, the National Park Service biologists have been studying local carnivores, specifically bobcats, coyotes, and mountain lions. Mountain lions since 2002, and then bobcats and coyotes started in 1996. Primarily looking at how these animals do in urban environments, what their diet is, movement patterns, and then those causes of mortality for them. So the wildlife research looks at the overall health of the carnivores as well. And we do trap them and radio collar them so that we can follow them. And if these animals do die, we can collect them quickly and understand the purpose and why they died. Our study area is the Santa Monica Mountains, as well as the Simi Hills and the fragmented habitats that are on the north side of the 101 freeway. And for mountain lions, we've also moved north of the 118, and occasionally we have lions that will disperse over into the 126. And we do have one mountain lion as well, P22, that is in the Griffith Park area. So a lot of folks think that, or at least that I've talked to, believe that animals and wildlife tend to live in this natural habitat, and then only people live here where the concrete and the houses are. And during our study, we did not really see that, and I'll explain that in a few minutes. Especially with habitat loss and habitat fragmentation in Southern California, it's quite prevalent, but you can imagine that when you have this fragmentation, these urban developments come up right against the edge of the fragmented habitat. So it comes right up against this natural habitat. And wildlife never got that memo that says they needed to stay into that natural area. They actually spend majority of their time in that natural habitat, but with all the video cameras and ring cameras, the security cameras we have out there, people tend to get a lot of photos of them now. When we're doing the study, majority of these animals are going into those urban environments during those nighttime hours when people are sleeping and it's quiet. So we definitely did see them using that urban environment, but primarily they still like to reside in that natural habitat. But you can see by the home range polygons I have here that their home ranges do go right up against that edge where the urban environment is. Also, with habitat fragmentation, you can see that these animals have to cross roads if they want to get from one habitat fragment to another habitat fragment. This is an example of an animal coming at nighttime. The blue dots are the nighttime locations of the animal kind of cruising through this fragmented habitat and then going back up to the larger habitat during the day. You can also see the way that developers make these urban developments is they tend to interwove, natural landscape within it, maybe a golf course within it. And so this is a natural corridor that these wild animals are going to want to use, and they come right through it, and we get locations of them coming right up against these urban homes and developments as well, that they're kind of led through with the natural stream corridor, or maybe even the park or a golf course, as I mentioned. This is an example of P22 in the Hollywood Hills, where you have these houses and these that are on the ridges, and then these steep canyons, and then these animals tend to use the canyons and these small pieces of open habitat And the houses just kind of end up being an obstacle in their territory that they just kind of have to go over to get to the next piece of open habitat. And often you'll see that they just move through the landscape this way. But you can imagine this is a very difficult landscape for wildlife to move through without having to go through urban development. So why do these animals go through this urban development? Well, one of the things I talked about was they're trying to you have young animals that often are trying to disperse from one habitat to another. And that's what you have this mountain lion here on this fence. This was a young female that ended up in an urban developed area as she was looking for that home range for her to disperse into. Other animals might be coming in, such as coyotes, because they're attracted to food. This coyote has a watermelon in its mouth that it obviously did not get from the natural habitat, but maybe got from the trash can or a compost bin. Some animals may even find a nice safe place to hide and be safe in den. You can see on the top right picture, this is a bobcat with her 2 kittens. It's a female. And if you look below the first kitten here, you can see mom's eyes. Now she denned right in the wall of someone's backyard. So there's lots of different reasons why these animals move through the landscape, but a lot of it is potentially for food as well. But as I mentioned, just to get from one fragmented habitat, which is not often big enough to sustain many different animals or of those species. So they're going to have to move to disperse to get to that other habitat. So they do have to go through that urban development sometimes to do that. So in our study, one of the causes of mortality we definitely saw was from vehicle collisions, which you would expect, especially in this urban developed area where they have habitat fragmentation, roads going through, and trying to disperse from one habitat to another. One of the things we didn't particularly expect to see was that unintentional poisoning of our wildlife. And this is one thing we unfortunately did see. And there's a perfect example of a bait box here that was put out by an HOA to kill rats that are in that area. Now, primary food source for bobcats is actually small mammals, which a lot of us consider in urban areas, most people consider as pets or pests. But they are very important. These pests to us are super important food source for our bobcats, coyotes, and our raptors, many other wildlife that are out there. And in fact, when we did our diet study, we found that rabbits was a huge source of food resource, but as well, pocket gophers were also very important for bobcats, and wood rats played a very important role as well. So unfortunately, when we put out rat poisons to kill what we consider pests, but are a primary food source for our wildlife, we have found that we are unintentionally killing the wildlife. And generally what people do is they put these poisons inside the bait boxes. The problem is animals don't die in these bait boxes. All they are bait boxes. The animals go in, they eat the bait, they come back out. And often it takes a rodent about 5 to 10 days before they actually die. During that time, they end up moving around very slowly in the environment, and in fact can even be an easier catch for the predators out there that are trying to eat them. You might see these bait boxes. They're black, green. Sometimes you see an upside down T. This one's really messy where it still has bait even spilling out of it. You can see these blue granules that are not even contained in the box. So now potentially your pets are exposed if they were to come up and lick it and eat it from the ground there. Often these are distributed by golf courses, HOAs, apartment buildings. You'll see them sometimes even around commercial buildings as well. Now, what we did find, as I mentioned, is the unintentional poisoning of the wildlife. Bobcats, we saw quite a few bobcats die, not directly from rat poisons, but were exposed for rat poisons. And in fact, many of the bobcats had 2 or more different compounds of rat poisons. Now, for them, we found they were anticoagulant rodenticide poisons. It's first generation and second generation. And it wasn't just one compound, which is what happens is so that they distribute, typically a box has one type of compound, but we were finding several different compounds, which means they were getting poisons from several different areas that were using different types of rodenticide poisons. So as I mentioned, they didn't always die directly from rat poisons, but what we were finding with the bobcats is they were getting severe cases of mange. And mange is a mite, it's a microscopic mite that you can't see that burrows into their skin. It causes intense itching, inflammation, they scratch, then they get infected, also reduces their nutrition. And so they start to eventually eyes crust over because they're continuously scratching, and they eventually starve to death. The bobcats that had severe cases of mange, and many of the bobcats unfortunately also had a lot of rodenticide poisons in them as well. And what we believe was happening is there was a correlation where rodenticide poisons were actually weakening their immune systems and giving them the inability to fight this mange disease that they had. We also found that mountain lions were dying from rat poisons. This is our first 2 mountain lions that actually died from rat poisons, P3 and P4. And then we had 4 more since then that have died. So now we're up to 6 different mountain lions that unfortunately have died directly from rat poisons. How did mountain lions get rat poisons? How do any of these animals get it? Besides the fact that it just moves up the food chain. The rodents go in the box, they eat the bait, they get poisoned. Now they're a bundle of toxin. And so when that bobcat or coyote eats the rodent, then it gets the poison. And so with mountain lions, we believe majority of it is tertiary poisoning going up 3 levels. So they might be eating raccoons or coyotes that have actually eaten the poisons as well. We see this in owls, raptors, and as I mentioned, it could happen to your pets. So what we've seen over our years of study is 83% of the coyotes in our study have tested positive for rat poisons. 90% of the bobcats in our study have tested positive for rat poisons. We had 6 mountain lions actually die from it, with 27 out of 28 testing positive, and that's 96%. Even a 3-month-old mountain lion kitten had rat poisons in its system when it died. We have a raccoon here in the lower left picture that died underneath someone's deck. When we did a necropsy on it, it actually had rodenticide poisons in its system as well, where they opened up the stomach and they actually found the granule pellets. And it's pretty sad that there was a bait box literally right next to the deck where it died. Here is a picture of P22, who also was exposed to anticoagulant rat poisons, first generation difasinon and chlorofascine, as well as second generation compounds of rat poisons. This is not just happening locally, but this is happening throughout our state, throughout the country. The state did a study in 2016 and found that 111 mountain lions were tested in 37 different counties, with 95% of those animals being positive for rat poisons. It's been found in raccoons, foxes, skunks, black bears, badgers, eagles, hawks, owls. So there's a huge reason to want to help protect these animals and use alternatives to rat poisons. We're going to quickly talk about what first generation versus second generation rodenticides is. So the first generation anticoagulant is a multiple feed poison. It's often used for for working on squirrels and killing gophers and moles. It often takes several feeds before the animal dies from it. The most common one right now is difasinon. The second generation is a single feed rodenticide poison, and it generally takes one feed for the animal to get enough poison before it dies, but it still takes several days for that animal to actually die. Second generation is primarily used to on rats and mice. We've also seen a newer rodenticide called bromethaline that's been showing up recently because people are slowing down on using anticoagulants, which is great, but now they're just transferring to a different type of poison. And so, like I mentioned, this one has also been showing up. The state lab found in 10 non-targets animals, this rodenticide came up, and that was raccoons, skunk, 2 gray foxes, and a coyote. And recently, we have also found bromethaline exposure in 2 of our mountain lions. So what are some alternatives that you can use? I'm going to go over some of them, and then Carolyn's going to add to it. But first of all, I'd like to say structure exclusion is really one of the most important things. Walking the perimeter of your house, looking for access points where these animals can get in is really important, and sealing up those access points, keeping them out of the house. I understand that most of us don't want rats in our house, and I completely get that. Trapping also is something that you should consider doing, but we really prefer the trapping happens inside so you don't have accidental trapping of non-target species outside. Removal of shelter for any of those rodents that are out there, and food. And we'll talk about that in just a second. And then there's repellents and some natural predators as well that are potential alternatives. So as I mentioned, there's all kinds of traps out there. There's electric traps, snap traps. Some people use live traps. The disadvantage of using live traps is you are technically not allowed to catch an animal on your property and remove it to natural habitat. And there's several reasons for that. First of all, you could be catching a roof rat or a black rat in your backyard and actually releasing this non-native species into the natural habitat. And that could impact other rats that are natural to the habitat, as there could be some competition among those animals. And then there's also the potential that you could take some type of disease and transfer it to natural habitat, which we wouldn't want you to do either. So bottom line is it's not legal to transfer or move them out of your yard into natural habitat. You can catch them in your house and then move them into your yard if that's something that you would want to do. We also do not recommend glue traps, and Carolyn's going to cover that later. Some other things that you can do around the house besides trapping is some of that maintenance around the yard, cleaning up vegetation, picking up any food resources that I was talking about. Marin County put this really awesome infographic together that really touches and shows all the different examples of things that you can do around your own yard. And I'm just going to show some examples in real life pictures for you to see that. So as I mentioned, walking around your house, kind of auditing the outside perimeter of your house, checking for all the potential spots that mice can get into and rats can get into. It's really important to remember a mouse can get into the hole that's about the size of a dime. So you're looking for some pretty small spots that they can get into, and really focus around pipes. Look at deferred maintenance around vents for your attic or your crawl space, wires that maybe the cable folks put in, but they didn't actually seal it up. And then under door gaps as well, you want to check that weather stripping or try to level out your door. And here's some great examples of tools and things that you can use that still look really clean and neat, to try to seal it up and prevent them from getting in. 1/4-inch hard wire is generally what is recommended. You can screw it in This also works for, and you want to do this for underneath decks as well, which will help you if you have skunk problems or coyotes that tend to get underneath your deck. Also, sometimes around your vents for your laundry is also another great idea. Some people also will even put one-way exclusion funnels so that the rodents can get out first, because you do kind of want to get those rodents out before you close them all in, or it's going to smell pretty bad for a while in your house. Also pay attention to those vents or pipes that are on top of your roof, around your air conditioning units. If you have them on top of your roof, you can use the 1/4-inch wire there. You can also use steel wool for some of these areas. Here's some example wire mesh, steel wool, caulking in certain areas. Some folks will use even foam, the hard foam that will fill that hole for you. Again, these are not, they need to be monitored and watched, because foam is something that can eventually be chewed through. And if a rodent wants to get in, they're going to work their way in. So you need to be diligent and continue to refill until they stop trying to get access. Also around your garage doors, you might want to consider doing some extra, if you're having issues there, check those areas and seal them up. There's all kinds of different types of weather stripping that you can do now. And then I've seen these crazy cones that go over piping so that they can't actually climb up the piping and get into a hole there. So something else to consider. So that's structure exclusion, but really let's get down to some of the other things that rodents really like, which is food. So if you have a lot of food availability on your property, they're getting food within the house, then they're going to start breeding really well, and you're going to have lots of babies. So as soon as you get rid of some, more will be back. So it's really important to get rid of those food resources. And the palm trees that drop all kinds of fruits, fruit trees. I like to show this guard around your tree. You can do the cone guard, very similar to was on the pipe around a tree. You can also do this metal sheeting around your trees as well to prevent them from jumping up. You do want to make sure that your trees, though, are trimmed back from your roof lines, so you can try to keep them off of the roof. And then potentially off of any, away from any cable lines or electric lines that might go through, or telephone lines, because they'll just walk the lines and jump into your trees and eat the fruit that way. Pick up any pet food. Do not leave pet food out. Close up your trash cans. And this one here with the bird feeders is also something you want to consider removing, because mice and rats really love the seed that those birds drop. And the birds are fun to watch, but when the rodents come and eat the seed after those messy birds are done, that's never very fun for us. Also, removing those compost bins. Access to a compost bin, if it's open, is just free buffet for these animals. You can get all kinds of different types of compost bins that are completely closed. And that's what I would suggest doing. Continue to compost, but make sure it's a closed compost bin that they don't have access to. And then our gardens. I know there's always a lot of questions. I also live in an area that has rodents, and I really struggle with ground squirrels. So I have put a garden together that is a completely walk-in garden. This is a little different. I pulled this picture off the internet, although this is a really fun one as well. And it seems simple enough to make with the box and everything, and will help you with gophers if you have a gopher problem. But you can completely seal up these gardens if you have some space. You can even do it with, I did my blueberries are on the outside, and I have to put a cage around my blueberries. But it's all doable. Also, removing that thick vegetation. Any thick vegetation is a great place for them to harbor and hide. As well as debris piles or wood piles that you have near your house. So you want to thin out any vegetation. Ivy is a great place for these animals to breed and hide and hang out in, and the thick vegetation from unkempt bushes as well. So I would suggest trimming your vegetation up. This will also give you the ability to see if there's any other wildlife in your yard so that you're not surprised when you go outside one day and maybe there's a rattlesnake that's hanging out, but you'll be able to see because your vegetation would have been lifted up off the ground. So kind of that more cleanscape vegetation. And I would really suggest around the house line as well, maybe even using this rock is always suggested to help keep it a little bit on that cleaner side so that you can see if there's any rodent activity. Rodents like cover. So if you have a lot of cover and vegetation right along your house line, it's an easy way for them to find those little holes that you potentially have there. I just wanted to talk real quick about raptors and natural predators. Ventura County Watershed Protection District did a raptor study a few years back, and they put up raptor poles around their levees, and they did a control site and a test site. And so the control site continued to use bait boxes while the test site installed raptor perches and owl nest boxes. The study results in that research project actually found that there was a 66% reduction in squirrel burrows where the raptor perches and the owl boxes were installed. So that's a pretty decent reduction. And they, in fact, were so excited about how much money they saved by having the raptor perches there that they ended up putting raptor perches along all their levees. So what we decided to do at the Park Service is we actually wanted to test some raptor perches as well at one of our facility sites. It's an open grass field, just to see would they come, would they use it. Our site has tons of squirrels on it. So we put up 3 raptor perches just this last year that were during the COVID time. So we were able to get them up real quick, and then we've been doing a little bit of monitoring just to see if they're using them. The good news is they are using them, so we're really happy to say that. We've detected 5 different raptor species that actually use our perches, and it's good because we're drawing hawks in. So we have a Cooper's hawk here, a red-shouldered hawk, and then we have a red-tailed hawk. So juvenile red tail. And then we found that the hawk's primary diets they're diurnal animals. So they're going to be focusing more on squirrels, gophers, and rabbits in this area. But we also found that we have 2 owls that are 2 different species of owls that are also using the perches. And we have the barn owl and the great horned owl. And they are being nocturnal animals. They're primarily going to be eating also gophers, rats, and mice, and occasionally they'll catch some rabbits as well. So it's still undetermined if they've been able to really narrow down the squirrel population or gopher population that we have in that field, but they're definitely out there using the perches and hunting the fields as they come back almost daily and nightly to these perches. Also, there's been some HOAs and Oak Park School District that have been installing owl boxes. And there's an HOA in Thousand Oaks. They installed 2 owl boxes in 2019. One of the box was actually used or was occupied in 2020. And preliminary study on that nest box found that they were eating rats. So we did find 24 rats that remains in that box, but we haven't been able to actually go through all the contents of the box. So they did do their job. They occupied, and they actually are eating the rodents that the HOA was hoping that they would do. Oak Park School District, they put out 10 owl boxes, barn owl boxes specifically, and they at their schools, and I think it was 6 different schools, those were installed in 2019. Now only 3 of those boxes were occupied. in 2020, but still that's pretty good. Because it could take years sometimes for owls to even find these little boxes, or if it's not put in the proper area or facing the right direction, they just may not be interested in it at all. So like I said, 3 of those boxes were used. So they obviously were eating. We don't know exactly what they were eating there because we haven't had a chance to look at the data on that one, but they're definitely there and were successful in raising young. So that's it for me. I will say though, owl boxes, if that's something that you were interested in doing and do want to do, and I know Carolyn's going to talk about that a little bit later, they are specific. Owl boxes cannot be put up just in any neighborhood or anywhere. You really have to have the right habitat for an owl box, for an owl to occupy a box so that it will be used. So keep that in mind if that's something. Really look into it, and we can talk offline about that if you guys have questions. And my information is here if you want to take a snapshot of it, or you can contact Carolyn.
So just to tell you a little bit about poison-free Agoura, our focus is rodent poison. That's what our project is focused on. And we're all about problem solving and education. My background is more organizational consulting and MBA and creative problem solving. So this is a really big problem, is rodent poison. And so we are here for you. We are here to help you with your problem. And we're here to provide alternatives to these rodent poisons. One of the things that's come up is many people have said to me, oh, I hear that rat poisons are banned in the state of California. And as Kathy has just discussed, this is not true. The California Ecosystems Protection Act, or AB 1788, was signed into law by Governor Newsom, and it puts a moratorium on second-generation anticoagulant rodenticides until further evaluation. But first-generation anticoagulant rodenticides and other poisons are still on the shelves of stores and in use by pest control professionals. I know Kathy went into the rodent poisons. I just wanted to reiterate that rodents wander around and stay alive for 3 to 10 days, often returning to the bait stations. And the anticoagulants inhibit the vitamin K blood thinner, they prolong the clotting time and lead to uncontrolled bleeding and death. And we're going to take a look at some other poisons that are out there right now. These are the non-anticoagulant poisons. Zinc phosphide, you often see it turns stomach acids into phosphine, a toxic gas. There's no antidote with this. All of these poisons, no antidote, single feeding. Bromethylene is one that attacks the central nervous system and causes brain swelling. And vitamin D3, I take that myself. You would think, how bad can that be? Well, it isn't good. It's a dangerous, dangerous rat poison. And these are out there, and we're seeing more use of them. The other thing is glue traps. They do not discriminate. A lot of times when people use glue traps, and I've run into them at a wildlife fair, they say, oh my goodness, I use that and I am scarred for life. These are just terrible traps, and birds and animals endure great suffering and starvation in these traps. More consequences for poisons. Mouse and rat poisons are number 2 out of 10 common dog poison toxins. The Pet Poison Helpline gets a lot of calls about these. And again, D3 is very dangerous. Rodent poisons are often flavored in chocolate and peanut butter, and children may mistake these baits as food. And baits are usually placed on the floor, and that's accessible by children and pets. In the upper right corner, you'll see a cat. One of our poison-free Agoura team members took this picture, and her cat is looking at a rat that is dead. Another of our team members, her beloved pet Sasha, ate a turquoise substance in her backyard. She was not using poisons, but we believe the rat brought the poison into her yard. So it tells you how dangerous these poisons are. Again, I have to mention this because we're seeing this a lot. There's a very narrow margin of safety. This is information from the pet poison line. Just reading this, it's even a small amount, severe clinical signs or death. So this is a very toxic poison. You know, we had P78, we had P67. Both of them had this bromethylene in the systems, and cats are more sensitive than dogs. And there's a very narrow margin of safety for these poisons and no antidote. Now I wanted to talk about in our own backyard what we've seen. This was bobcat number 1. We tried to save bobcat number 1. We could not save it. Kathy and I tried. It was spotted around Agoura High School, and we saw this, and it's a very sick bobcat. We don't know what happened to it, but we believe that it was poisoned just based on how it was moving and what it looked like. This is one bobcat, B372, that I was very close with. And you can see in the top the healthy looking bobcat and what she looked like when she was found deceased on June 8th of 2020. In her system were poisons. And you see this difasinon. This was in P22 in 2014. Very dangerous poison that is still available. And she was the second bobcat known to die as a direct result of poisoning in a 24-year study. This is why it's so important to get education out. This is why we're so passionate about talking to people about poisons. And we're growing. We are growing in our educational areas. Now we have Cities Against Rat Poison. You could go to citiesagainstratpoison.com. Something that we're doing in Old Agoura and Liberty Canyon right now is sending new neighbor orientation packets filled with information about how to use alternatives to poisons, who you can contact if an animal is poisoned. We have a beautiful National Park Service checklist, which I'll show you, and is also available on the Poison Free Agoura site, that's helpful to you. We also publish a Critter Chronicle, which is a quarterly newsletter about coexisting with our urban wildlife, and there are some tips on how to use alternatives to poisons. So now let's talk about what our presentation's about, is repelling, excluding, and deterring rodents. What do rodents like? Food, water, and shelter. You eliminate food, water, and shelter, the rodents don't want to be around. I have to say that at my house, we have, well, I can go out at 5 in the morning. I can go out at 8 at night, and I don't hear any rats anymore because I've really followed these practices. And this particular checklist that's on the site was developed by National Park Service, and it gives you a really great getting started home checklist. So repelling mice and rats using herbs and plants. They do not like mint. Rodent repellents, more peppermint, more spearmint, more garlic oils, motion detecting water sprays, strobe lights, and professional level repellents. And it's always important that whenever you're using anything that you handle with care, and that you make sure that you look at all the ingredients, and depending on where you're going to be using the repellents, that everything is a-okay for you. And excluding mice, Kathy talked a lot about this. One of the things we do is we roll our barbecue into the garage at night to keep it nice and sealed. Our garage is nicely sealed, and maintaining those garage doors is very important. We also have professionals on our website that can help you seal up your home. Deterring mice, owl boxes, raptor perches, removing vegetation, as Kathy had mentioned, and taking in bird feeders. One of the things I did is I eliminated my bird feeder. I know that many people love their bird feeders, but I found that really mitigated a lot of issues with our rodents. And there is one suggestion is feeding the birds in the morning and maybe taking the tray and bringing it in so that birdseed is not out all night. Here's a ground squirrel that I photographed on our property. We used to only get calls about rodents inside. We seem to get most of our calls now for rodents outside and repelling gophers and ground squirrels, breaking up the burrows, vanilla flavored coffee beans and garlic cloves and organic kitty litter with urine, in the holes, putting that, black pepper, pepper-based products. Again, the motion detecting water sprays and different types of plants, and castor bean granules and concentrates, and gopher stopper clover, which is something that we have on our website that you can check out. And some of these stainless steel mesh fencing, hardware cloth. Kathy went into a little more of this, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. And fallen berries, nuts, acorns, picking those up, removing any kind of food source, pet food, definitely. And the owl boxes and raptor perches are very helpful for deterring them. So now I want to show you what we've been testing. Okay, here's something that many of you may be familiar with. And I tell you, I'm in the same shoes. I've spent over $1,000. And being a person who owns a horse, who has a truck that isn't moved a lot, it's so important, because we do live in a fire zone, is that that truck is working at all times, that I can get my horses out if I need to. And this is a particular rat that I filmed in my car engine area. And in the far right is what my truck looks like. I have not been spraying anything. I'm not doing anything. As long as I'm shining that light in the engine area, it seems that it's doing its job. In the center, you see that there's some postcards, and we were, before COVID, distributing these to some of our automotive businesses, and they were carrying our cards so we could help the customers. But this is something that you can do. It's interesting because this rat was extremely clever. I put a little pouch in there of spearmint and peppermint, and it chewed it off, and everything works a little bit differently for everyone. This is what's worked for us. Nothing like a wildlife camera to show you what underneath the bird feeders looks like at night. This is what we found. There was lots of rats out at night. That was one of the things that convinced us that maybe we don't want a bird feeder there. If you have issues with your garden, sometimes you can get these mini greenhouses. And what we did is we stopped planting a lot of the things that we did. We went and we switched to herbs and things. But these little mini greenhouses can be very helpful. And now, one of the projects I've done was these little ground squirrels. They're super cute, but they were digging underneath my wash rack in our brand new shed. And you see on the right side, this is what it looks like now. I planted spearmint. I've sprayed with a product that's on our site called Propel. I used Critter Ritter, which is a pepper-based product around the foundation and in the burrows. And I broke up all the burrows and patted them down really well and planted the spearmint. And I've been really managing the ground squirrels quite well. I also have 2 raptor poles right by the shed. And during the day, I see crows on the raptor poles. I'll see raptors. I'll see songbirds. And at night, I have this fantastic great horned owl that visits us. And one day I actually caught him. He grabbed a rabbit and pulled it up on the pole. And here I spray repellents such as Propel rodent repellent around our house. Our house is all sealed up. And we've cleared out the vegetation around our home. And another thing that we have in Old Agoura right now is we're doing a pilot for barn owl nesting boxes. And we have a 5th one going up. We have not had our occupancy yet, but there's probably about 9 in our neighborhood right now. So we're just checking around and seeing how those are doing. And these are just some pictures I've taken around my house. Just amazing natural rodent control. one of our Cities Against Rat Poison, or we call ourselves CARP. It's happening in Bradbury, California. What they're doing is they're taking 3 acres of pasture and testing out products for ground squirrels and gophers. So these are just a few pictures. They're treating with castor oil, as well as another product called Nature's Defense. And this just gives you a picture of what they're doing and the wonderful crew. So that's it. We have our websites that you can visit. Poison Free Agoura has sites. Any of our CARP partners have a lot of information. Poison Free Malibu, of course, has so much great information, and Nature Neighbor. We're also on social media, and please check out our website for our Critter Chronicle newsletters. We also have critter cameras, so we're monitoring the health of our wildlife, and we're seeing some wonderful animals through our cameras. If you do want to check out our Facebook groups and page, we're coexisting with Agoura Hills Urban Wildlife and Poison Free Agoura. Bobcats are Liberty Canyon, and the coyote was a collared coyote I just recently photographed. So there are schools, parks, homeowners associations that are making the difference and making efforts to use alternatives to poisons. And that's it. I did want to do a shout out to our friends at Poison Free Malibu, though. Malibu has passed a local coastal program amendment that restricts the use of pesticides. And the details are to be determined later, but we're really excited for Malibu.